You are on Tips and Streams with your host, Coca.
What's good, everyone? Welcome back to Tips and Streams. I'm Koken, and I hope you're doing well and feeling locked in wherever you're listening from. All right, let's get to the daily picks. I've got 4 NBA matchups on the card today, so buckle up. We're diving straight into the action. The first prediction for today's NBA games is for the game between the New York Knicks and the Philadelphia 76ers. When I break down this Knicks-Sixers matchup, I'm not just looking at box scores or surface trends. I'm reading the temperature of both locker rooms. And right now, those temperatures are moving in opposite directions. Philadelphia has been living at home lately, and while the results during this stretch haven't been perfect, I actually like what I'm seeing underneath the record. This group just came through a gritty overtime win where their composure was tested, their legs were tired, and their defensive focus had to be locked in. That matters to me. Teams don't accidentally survive games like that. What stands out is how Philadelphia closes. When games tighten up, they slow the pace, protect the ball, and force opponents into uncomfortable looks. Tyrese Maxey has clearly embraced the role of late-game organizer, and whether Joel Embiid is dominating touches or drawing attention off the ball, the structure holds. That tells me this team understands who they are when it matters most. On the other side, the Knicks are a tough read. Yes, the blowout win in their last outing stands out, but I'm always careful not to confuse relief with rhythm. I still see a team that's been carrying heavy minutes, leaning into isolation late in possessions, and showing signs of defensive fatigue. Extended rest helps the legs, but it doesn't instantly repair timing or chemistry. I also can't ignore context. Philadelphia has already beaten New York twice this season, both times on the road. That's not random. That's matchup control. The Knicks want to play downhill and fast. The Sixers are comfortable dragging them into half-court chess. Historically, New York has stolen wins in this building, but those games were coin flip finishes. You can't keep flipping heads forever. For me, this game represents a professional checkpoint for Philadelphia. They're at home, they're aware of the narrative, and they know this is the type of matchup that defines whether a season stabilizes or slides. I trust their discipline more than I trust New York's rhythm right now. So I'm planting my flag here. My prediction is that Philadelphia will cover the 1.5-point spread at home. I believe the Sixers control the tempo, defend with purpose late, and take care of business when the game is decided in the margins. Today's second prediction is for the game between the Golden State Warriors and Minnesota Timberwolves. When I break this matchup down, I keep coming back to one word: context. And the context around this game matters more than the raw numbers. I'm looking at two teams moving in opposite emotional directions, even if both are coming in off losses. Minnesota has hit a rough patch, no doubt about it. 4 straight losses will punch any team in the mouth, especially when the most recent one comes at home after holding control late. But from my experience watching this league for decades, these are exactly the spots where disciplined, two-way teams tend to respond. And Minnesota, despite the skid, still fits that profile. What stood out to me in their last outing wasn't effort or energy, it was execution. They didn't apply enough pressure downhill. They left points at the line, and they failed to close when the game slowed down. That's correctable. That's not structural damage. Julius Randle carried the offense. The supporting cast showed up. And even with Anthony Edwards having an inefficient night, they were still right there. To me, that signals a bounce-back brewing rather than a collapse. Now flip it to Golden State, and the picture gets heavier. Jimmy Butler being sidelined changes everything about how this team functions late in games. Without him, the margin for error disappears. I watched that Dallas game closely. Stephen Curry was brilliant, but brilliance alone doesn't win games anymore in this league. When the fourth quarter arrived and stops were required, Golden State simply couldn't hold the line. That's where Butler's absence screamed the loudest. And here's the bigger issue for me: balance. Golden State's offense is leaning heavily toward perimeter creation, and Minnesota is one of the few teams built to absorb that pressure. They defend space well, they contest without fouling, and they have multiple bodies to throw at shooters. On the other end, Minnesota can punish Golden State inside and force defensive rotations that expose a thin Warriors bench. I also can't ignore the recent history. Minnesota has been comfortable in this matchup, including winning in this building and on the road. That's not accidental. It's a matchup advantage rooted in size, discipline, and physicality. Add the urgency of snapping a losing streak at home, and I see a focused Timberwolves group coming out with intent. Golden State will compete. Curry will have his moments. But over 48 minutes, I trust Minnesota's structure, health, and motivation more in this spot. My money is on the Minnesota Timberwolves to win this game and cover the 5-point spread at home. I'm riding with Minnesota to respond, control the tempo, and remind everyone why they're built for moments like this. The third prediction for today is for the game between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Orlando Magic. When I break down this matchup, I don't start with records or recent scorelines. I start with context. And this game is all about timing, legs, and environment. From my perspective, Orlando is stepping into this spot with a quiet edge that doesn't always jump off the page, but absolutely matters once the ball goes up. I'm not overreacting to Orlando's last performance. I've watched this league long enough to know that ugly losses after travel happen, especially when rhythm gets disrupted. What matters to me is how a team responds, and this Magic group usually answers back when challenged at home. They play with more physicality, they rebound with intent, and their defense looks far more connected when they're settled into their own building. Cleveland, on the other hand, walks into this game carrying heavy minutes and emotional residue from the night before. I respect what they've done lately, but I don't love the situation. Asking a shorthanded team to bring the same defensive focus on the road, on tired legs, is a tough sell for me. When Cleveland slows down even slightly, their margin for error shrinks fast. From a tactical angle, this matchup tilts toward Orlando's strengths. The Magic don't beat themselves. They value possessions, they attack the rim, and they force opponents to defend without fouling. That matters against a Cleveland defense that's been vulnerable on the perimeter and inconsistent when fatigue sets in. I expect Orlando to live in the paint, earn trips to the line, and control the rebounding battle far better than they did in their previous outing. I also trust Orlando's defensive identity at home. They're disciplined, they close space well, and they don't allow easy rhythm shots. Cleveland relies heavily on shot creation from its stars, and when the legs aren't fresh, those jumpers tend to come up short late in games. That's usually where Orlando separates, not early, but over the final stretch when effort and execution decide things. For me, this isn't about fading Cleveland blindly. It's about buying Orlando in the right spot. Fresh legs, home floor, defensive urgency, and a matchup that rewards physical play. I've seen this story play out too many times to ignore it. I'm backing the Magic to protect their home floor and win this game in Orlando. This is the kind of spot where preparation, energy, and defense matter more than headline numbers, and that's exactly why I'm riding with Orlando. Today's last prediction is for the game between the Miami Heat and the Utah Jazz. When I break down this matchup between Miami and Utah, I'm not chasing highlights or star power. I'm chasing structure, patterns, and repeatable outcomes. This game, to me, is a textbook example of where discipline beats noise, and where historical behavior matters more than recent box scores. Utah's season has been rough. No way around it. The win-loss record doesn't flatter them, and the defensive metrics have been ugly at times. But I've learned over decades of watching this league that not all struggling teams are equal, especially when they step back into their own building. Salt Lake City still changes how games are played. Pace shifts, shot selection tightens, and visiting teams often need a full half just to find rhythm. Miami, on the other hand, comes into this one searching for consistency. I see a team that still knows how to win, but doesn't always know how to separate. The Heat can control games late, but too often they let opponents hang around. That's been a recurring theme, especially on the road, where their margins tend to shrink instead of expand. What really grabs my attention here is the head-to-head dynamic between these teams. Over time, Miami has usually found a way to finish games, but Utah has quietly been reliable at staying within striking distance. That combination matters when the number on the board is this generous. The Jazz don't need to be the better team for 48 minutes. They just need to avoid the collapse. The swing factor, for me, is Lauri Markkanen. If he's active, Utah's offense looks completely different. Spacing improves instantly. Help the defense get punished. The floor opens up for the guards, and suddenly, Utah doesn't have to force shots late in the clock. Without him, the Jazz grind. With him, they breathe. Even limited minutes from Markkanen tilt the math back toward competitiveness. Miami still holds the edge in execution and late-game composure, and I respect that. I wouldn't be shocked if the Heat walk out with the win, but I don't see separation. I see long stretches where Utah trades punches, feeds off the home crowd, and keeps Miami from pulling away. This is not a game I overthink. It's not about who looks better on paper. It's about trend behavior, matchup geometry, and situational value. I'm riding with Utah to cover the 7.5-point spread at home. Even if Miami does what Miami usually does and escapes late, I expect this game to stay tight from start to finish. From my perspective, this is a smart, efficient play built on patterns, not hype.